Hi, I'm Jeff Cook, and this is Backyard Basics. Told the guys this morning that we're going to just call this show Random Thoughts by Jeff Cook because there's a lot of stuff going on in the landscape, in the garden, on the farm. And I thought we just might ride around and look at different things going on in Taylor County. A lot of things that I talk to people about on a daily basis, you know, and maybe don't get to show them all the time. I don't always get to go out on a home visit or a farm visit. A lot of times when people call me, I can kind of tell them what things are over the phone. But I can't, and one thing I also can't do is I can't use a lot of pictures in my newspaper articles to show people the things that I'm seeing and kind of highlight things, and let other folks see them, so that, you know, when they do see it in their yard or their garden, you know, they can say, oh, you know, I remember him talking about that, or remember him writing about that. So we're just going to take this morning. It's June, almost the end of June, almost July. It feels like the start of fall this morning. It's nice and cool, low humidity. We're going to take this day and this morning to kind of ride around, look at some different things, and show you what's going on in the garden, some things you might expect to see in your garden later on, or some things you might have already seen that you just kind of had a question about. So we're going to do that, looking at a bunch of different crops, and let you see what's going on. All right, everybody knows that we came off a really mild winter. We might have had about 5 or 6 days below freezing, and probably everybody has seen from the gnats flying around your face this year. The insects are pretty bad this year. And it looks like it's shaping up, you know, we're midsummer now, it's shaping up to be a really bad insect year for all of our crops. Already seen armyworms in hayfield earlier on, actually last week. They're seeing things down in Tifton on row crops that we don't normally see this early, so they're popping up earlier, a month or two earlier than normal. So insects are probably going to be a real big issue. And luckily, since we've gotten the rains we've gotten, you know, diseases are probably also going to be, you know, something we have to contend with throughout this growing season. I'm going to touch on real first the insect part of it. You know, we'll look at some insects, and then maybe we'll be able to find some diseases and talk about them. Behind me, I've got some wildflowers, which is, you know, these are probably actually going to be wildflowers cut, you know, sold to be, you know, cut and sold. But one thing with wildflowers, you probably can see behind me, a lot of butterflies, a lot of bees. There's a lot of other insects in these wildflowers, and a lot of people are getting in small gardens in these roadside markets. They're using these wildflower strips not just to sell, you know, make a little bit of money. They're also using them to bring in beneficials. There's a lot of good insects out in here, and you think about butterflies, they're not only feeding on these flowers, but they're also laying eggs. Caterpillars out here feeding. Caterpillars are also good food for their insects. You got a big community of, you know, good and bad bugs, and these insects will actually, you know, the pollinators will actually go from here to your crop, and also the beneficials, the predators, the parasitic insects, they'll go from your flower patch to, you know, your garden, help control some of your insect pests. But we're going to kind of walk down this road. We got some squash and okra and a lot of insect pests. We're going to kind of walk down the road and take a look at some different things, talk a little bit about each one as we go. All right, so one of the biggest insects I get calls about is a squash bug. These little guys right here are immature squash bugs. They're all over this dying squash plant. A bunch of little ones right here just hatched out. Those insects will actually, they're in the stink bug family. They'll actually feed with sucky mouth parts at the base of the plant. It's really hard. You can kill them with some of the pyrethroid garden insecticides, but it's really hard to kill them because it's hard to get to them because they hide out most of the time up under the leaves. It's hard to get insecticide to where they actually are. If I can find one, I'm going to find you an egg cluster so you'll know what to look for. After the male and the female mate, the female will lay eggs top of the leaves, squash plants, zucchini, even cucumber, watermelon. And if they get real bad, you can actually find them on the weeds. You can find the egg masses on the weeds around the squash plant. But these eggs will hatch out. You've got a bunch of little ones right here. These little ones feed at the base. They inject enzymes into the base, and eventually that plant's going to wilt and die. And since we were going to talk about diseases also, this is powdery mildew squash. There's a lot of resistant varieties out there which are good to plant because they reduce the need for fungicides. But once it's gotten this bad, I mean, that's from powdery mildew, that's all from powdery mildew. Once it's gotten that bad, you're not going to be able to control it and bring that plant back to make it productive. All right, this is a leaf-footed bug, called that because the back legs look flattened like leaves. You got the white stripe across its wings. Also in the stink bug family, also has sucking mouth parts. This is the #1 pest in my yard on my tomatoes and everything else. It causes misshaped tomatoes, gets on the okra, flies away, very rapidly. A lot more leaf-footed bugs here feeding on, on top of the squash. Some immatures down there in the crown of the plant. They would probably be feeding on the squash. Where they're probably going to feed more likely though is behind us. There's a row of okra. They really love okra, tomatoes, things like that. They usually are going to feed, the stink bug type insects are usually going to be feeding on seeds or the fruit or vegetables, the seeds of the fruit and vegetables. These guys on this main stem are called Glassy wing sharpshooters. Not a real big pest directly. They don't feed a lot and cause a lot of damage by feeding, but they actually carry a bacteria that can get into certain crops, peaches being one, grapes being another, and they carry this bacteria that causes different diseases that actually will stunt plants and eventually blocks the vascular system, so the plant eventually will die. It's called phony peach in peaches and Pierce's disease in grapes. This is just an immature leaf-footed bug. They look a little kind of alien, and he's trying to hide from us here. But just an immature leaf-footed bug, so you know that mama and daddy have been making babies there. All right, I get this question a lot, not what the insects are coming out of the flowers, but a lot of people call me early on in the year or at certain times of the year and say my squash plants or my zucchini plants are blooming like crazy, but I'm getting no fruit. What's wrong? What's going on? There's nothing really going on wrong, but what happens on squash and zucchini is you have a male and a female flower. And the way you can tell is this male flower is just a flower on a stem. That's the male flower. This is the female flower. It actually already has the small squash at the base. Once it's pollinated with pollen from the male flower, then this will develop seeds and grow into a squash that you can eat. So when you're seeing these, you got female flowers. This is where your fruits, your vegetables actually going to come, your squash is going to come from. This is just good for pollen. So these, a lot of times you'll get a lot of these early on. They'll flower, open up, fall off, and you're like, what's going on? Well, that's what's going on. And there was a bee there. I don't know if y'all saw that. Good beneficial insect that we need for pollination. One thing with squash plants and even watermelons and things like that, we tell people a lot of times, to try and protect our pollinators. You can see this bee in there working this flower. One thing you can do though, a lot of times, once the temperatures warm up in the summertime, mid-morning to the afternoon, these flowers are going to fold up. So if you do have to spray an insecticide for like a leaf-footed bug or squash bugs, you can wait till the midday. The flowers are folded up. The bees aren't going to be actively going to them because they're not open. They can't get to them, so they're going to be in there. And I've actually seen where during the middle of the day picking squash, you can actually hear bees that are trapped in the flowers because they've closed on them, and they'll just stay there all day until they open back up and even, and they can leave. This is a pest you don't normally see, and we're not really seeing the pest anyway. This is an okra plant. Okras are notoriously good at attracting nematodes, which are little roundworms live in the soil. Small root system on this plant right here, but you can start seeing the knots, the nodules that this roundworm makes on the roots. This plant is extremely stunted, having trouble growing, and that's what you see in a garden patch that's that's been in the place for a while. You'll get nematodes. They start injuring the roots. You kind of wonder what's going on because you don't really see the problem, but once you dig the plant up, you can see on the plant that the roots are knotted up. And there's another plant right here I pulled up that it just doesn't even have any roots on it, and the few roots coming off are really stubby, where the nematodes have attacked it and caused a lot of damage. If you don't have roots, you can't grow top. We're over at a tomato patch now, kind of near the woods. Looks a little snaky, so I'm kind of scared standing here in the weeds. But anyway, I found these leaves right here, and I'm not going to pull these plants up like I did the okra because they're pretty good sized plants with tomatoes on them. And I'm not 100% sure that this is a spot that maybe has had tomatoes, over time. But this is actually, this symptom right here on these leaves, it actually looks, it's on a few different leaves, it actually looks like it could be from something going on with the roots, whether it be because they had too much moisture on them and just stayed waterlogged, or they might even have nematodes on them too. But you got some desiccation in between the veins, which sometimes happens as the water demand gets a little higher on plants as they get bigger, and they're stressed out because of nematodes or something with the roots. It doesn't look like any kind of disease. Now these leaves, and I can't tell you exactly what disease it is without taking it back to the office. There's a bunch of different fungal diseases. That actually does look like a fungal disease. A lot of times on tomato plants, they'll start on the lower leaves where they're really shaded, they're not getting a lot of airflow, you'll get a fungal disease starting there, and it'll kind of work its way up the plant. These plants are spaced out nice and evenly, got a good distance between the plants, which allows them to dry out, and they're not really bushy. One thing that would kind of hurt these is the fact they're going to be shaded once you get past noon. Once you get to about 1 or 2 or so, they're going to have a lot of shade, so that'll cause them to stay wetter. Might cause these diseases to be a little worse, but they've got good spacing between them, which is good to think about and good to know, or a good thing to do when you're gardening. You know, leave spacing between your plants to let the air flow through. Reduce the amount of fungicides you have to use. Now, in my house, there'd be three plants right here. It's like a wall of plants, and I do spray fungicides, you know, on a regular basis to keep them clean. Another disease we're seeing, you know, in the area with the recent rains and heavy rains and lack of sun is a bacterial spot or speck. I think it's bacterial spot actually with the warmer weather on tomatoes. Like I said, like the other fungal diseases, it's going to start off on the lower limbs and leaves. Kind of get some discoloration on the upper surface, and you kind of see these water-soaked dark spots on the lower part of the leaf. Not a lot you can do about this. Days like this, though, we got 4 or 5 days of good dry weather and good sunshine. That will pretty much stop most bacterial diseases on any kind of fruit or vegetable. All right, so in Taylor County and really all of Georgia, bird hunting, or dove hunting to be more specific, is really a popular sport, popular pastime. It's a favorite for a lot of people. People have traditions. Labor Day is going to be dove days, dove hunting season, and people get together, family, friends. Taylor County is no different. People plant a lot of different things to attract doves. Some people plant brown top millet, you got grains and things, but a lot of people like to have a sunflower field, which what you see behind me. One thing about sunflowers, if you really look at where they're grown historically in the country, it's the upper Midwest or upper central part of the country. Cooler climates, a lot more organic matter in those soils, a lot heavier soils, a lot more rich soils. So one thing we see in this part of the world is we can see some nutrient deficiencies that cause different problems. These leaves are actually pulled off of a plant behind me, and you can see these leaves on this plant here, and even up here on the upper surface, some of these upper leaves look like a fungal leaf spot. But when you really get to looking, when you get to studying about sunflowers, it's actually a micronutrient deficiency that's caused by something wrong going on with the roots. In this case, it's probably this low area, this field, probably collects a lot of water, holds water, suffocating the roots a little bit, so it's showing up as a nutrient deficiency, which looks like a fungal disease. You can spray fungicide and never correct this problem. You just hope the ground dries out just a little bit and let the roots grow. Another micronutrient disease we see in sunflowers sometimes, especially really sandy soils, is boron deficiency. And this plant right here, or the top of this plant that I pulled out, is showing some symptoms of boron deficiency with smaller, crinkled up, curled leaves, deformed leaves, and this head that's a little bit lighter color, and it's never going to form right. It's never going to open up right to form a flower and make seed. It's just going to stay probably like that. And it won't, so you can correct this with some foliar fertilizers. This is just one oddball plant out of this whole group that I found that actually was showing some boron symptoms. And then last but not least, everybody's favorite, deer damage. You can see on this plant right here, they chewed the whole top of that plant off, so you're not going to have a flower there. And then as you get on to some of these other plants, where they just nip leaves off, you'll still have a seed or a flower head to make some seeds, but they did do some damage there. And I've even seen where when this flower opens up, they come in and eat the whole head off. So you don't have a sunflower field until you have all your sunflower heads opened up, pollinated, and seed made, especially with deer around, and we got plenty of them here. As I said at the start of the show, it's almost July, and we've been getting some pretty good rain this year. We had a horrible year last year with drought, especially towards the end of the year. Really good rain this year, and I just wanted to point this out because this is really impressive. Dryland corn planted on time. This is a good-looking ear of corn. It's made. There's nothing's gonna hurt this now, other than maybe hail or something like that, which is out of our control. But the weather has been really kind to us corn growers. Irrigated corn should be really good this year. Cool temperatures during pollination, plenty of moisture to get this plant up and growing, fill these kernels out. And stink bugs have been fairly, a non-problem in corn this year. A lot of times we do have problems with stink bugs. Normally come July, August, our dryland corn, normally looks like this. This is actually the second ear on a corn plant. A lot of times a corn plant will have 2 ears. It'll have your initial ear here that's going to make most of your grain, and then a second ear down below it. But normally, like I said, in a normal year here in Taylor County, dryland corn, that's about what you can expect. But this year looks like a really good year for our corn growers. Looking at a striped cucumber beetle here. We also have spotted cucumber beetles, and there's a couple other ones that are all kind of related. And some of these guys will feed. The beetle will actually feed on the upper portion of the plant, cucumber, watermelon, whatever, cucurbits, mostly the vining types. You'll also see these guys in soybean patches and things, but they're and actually in the cornfield. The immature is actually what we call it, like a corn rootworm, or you can see rootworms in a lot of different crops causing damage, and they can generally just cause a lot of trouble. He decided he wanted to, oh, there he is, he's still there. They can cause a lot of problems. We had a lot of them last year that we noticed, and it looks like we're going to see a lot of them this year because I've already seen a bunch out in the fields. So it's one thing we need to be looking for. And it'll be one of those things where you may not see the damage because it's going to be, the majority of the damage is going to be to the roots where they lay their eggs at the base of the plant and they bore into the lower stem of the roots of the plant. So we'll be looking for that this year. All right, now this is one of Tim's bugaboos right here. It really scares him. But it really actually should make a lot of people kind of worry a little bit because the last few years we haven't had much trouble with kudzu bugs. These are kudzu bugs on the stem of a soybean congregating. They probably have a pheromone, a congregation pheromone that makes them all come together in one place. This is pretty early. These beans have about four true leaves on them. I mean, they're only about 1.5 feet tall, and we've already got a bunch of kudzu bugs on them. They'll feed on the stems, and they can cause some stunning. Usually we don't see them start to lay eggs and reproduce very, very readily until we get canopy closure. So these soybeans get on up 3-4 feet tall. The leaves kind of shade the rest of the ground out, and that's usually when it kind of cools down in this environment and they start reproducing and being successful. But what you can see here, we've already got an egg mass that I guess I must have knocked half of them off while I was playing with it. But these little things on your right, my left, those are eggs, and the small orange and brown little critters to the side of that, those are actually small first instar kudzu bugs. So most likely with the open canopy, beneficial insects and things in here, most likely these guys will die, get eaten, dry up, not be able to feed and do enough damage to do anything. But as this canopy closes, you'll start to see more and more of these immatures grow into be the adult beetle, and then reinfesting fields. All right, we're standing here next to a pecan orchard or pecan orchard, however you want to say it. But I'm going to show you one thing real quick. We talk about it all the time. Talk about scab being the #1 reason we can't grow a lot of pecans in our yard. Yard trees that usually just don't make. A good dry spring will be a good year for most people that have pecans in their yard. Obviously, this has not been a dry spring or start to the summer. We started off fairly dry, but we started getting rains, and then we got consistent rains. And this leaves that I pulled off of this orchard behind me, which is a managed orchard. And you can see right here these black spots on these leaves, or these leaflets of this leaf. Those black spots are actually that's the pecan scab fungus, which will move from the leaf tissue. If it happens early enough, it'll move from leaf to nuts and to the shuck of that nut, which actually constricts the nut, doesn't let it size up. Eventually, a lot of times those nuts will fall off. You'll never have you won't harvest a crop. Sometimes it can get so bad you lose leaves. Like I said, that's the #1 reason we can't grow a lot of trees or make a lot of pecans in our yards. Pecan scab hinders us, and it's shaping up to be another bad year for pecan scab. Like the insects we've talked about and other diseases. I mean, the moisture, the rain, the things we're blessed with here in the southeast, a lot of rain, a lot of humidity, heat, things like that, good growing conditions for our plants and our crops. They're also great growing conditions for diseases and insects that attack these crops. All right, so we talked a little bit about what the mild winter, the mild temperatures right now, and the moisture that we've got going on, what we think is going to be shaping up for this coming season. A lot of different insects, and disease problems that we're going to probably see that are a result of the milder temperatures we had during winter and the temperatures that we're having right now. So just be on the lookout. We touched on a few things that you might see in your garden, some things we might be seeing in some row crop fields, some agronomic crops, and fruits, nuts, vegetables, things. So be on the lookout. If you've got questions, you've got comments, give me a call at either my Peach County office or my Taylor County office. And if you've got ideas for a show or topics you wanted to learn more about, definitely give me a call, because I'm always looking for material to do my next Backyard Basics show on. Like I said, like I always say, my name's Jeff Cook, it's Backyard Basics, where we're filmed in your backyard.